you.
Again, speaking of not needing introductions, I'd like to introduce David Parkin OAM. Now, David, I'm going to take you back to the early 80s, talking about multitasking. You were teaching at Burwood Teachers College whilst on your way to coaching Carlton to famous back-to-back premierships in 81 and 82. Now, sitting in his first lecture during that time, David, was an impressionable young man who was also an avid Carlton supporter. Now, my question to you before we start, David, are we potentially liable for any copyright issues? Because that young fellow, Dave Burt, has seemed to have taken what he heard that day around your philosophy on sport and life and is probably the reason we're all here today. Have we got an issue, Parko?
I think you do. No, thank you very much for the welcome and the introduction. But no, Dave was on the front edge of his seat for most things that we participated in. I think we had a vigorous, I would have called it, debate in the introductory times with Dave, and we found we had much common ground, and that relates, fortunately for me, that friendship and relationship from that time has developed. And like Susan, I'm absolutely delighted to be a patron of SALT and support the work that they're doing.
Good on you, David. And David, just from your personal perspective there too, what has the lockdown meant for you, and what do you think that our sporting clubs do need to focus on during this time?
Well, it's been interesting for me. There have been negatives and positives. I think at the beginning of this, I lost my 4 major involvements. In a sense, I have a pacemaker, and the cardiologist said, get out of town, it'll knock people over like you. I'm very brave, so I ran away straight away. And for the last 8 months, I've been hiding down at my holiday house at Point Lonsdale. But in a week, I lost my contact with my family. I lost my teaching job at Deakin. I lost my ABC broadcasting role, and I lost my work in business as a leadership and teamwork consultant. So everything I knew went out the door. Thank goodness when I got down to Point Lonsdale, I was able to do all that 101 tasks that you've been looking at for 3 decades and don't have the time, and there are plenty of excuses not to do. Well, I've just about completed the 100 and that's been good. I've certainly missed the normal connection of people, but I'm a lousy cook. But the good part about that is I've lost 10 kilos. So there is a positive and negative to everybody. And I've actually not learnt quite, because one of my colleagues from the GOX, the gentleman at Kokoda's, just texted me to say, mute yours so I can hear what you're actually doing at the table. So, but I've learnt, not learnt really, but Zoom and FaceTime have become a link to the people that I know. So that's the negative. The positives are that I have completed those jobs, the building, painting and all that sort of thing. But I've also, which has been lovely, written my biography or autobiography, whatever you call it. And I guess it's not written as a publication for sale, but it's been an opportunity to reconnect with about 200 people in my life that have supported me and given me opportunities, etc. And I've really written the book as a recognition of that particular support. What I've done, obviously, was to check the stories and the history, was to ring more than 100 of those. So the reconnection to complete the task I'm doing has been one of the really positive aspects of being almost totally on my own here at Point Lonsdale. So it's had the negatives and the positives in a real sense, but I'm okay. I think Susan's point about routine is absolutely crucial, and that I'm a physical person, so I ride one day and try and break my record of the Queenscliff Point Lonsdale rectangle. I walk for a couple of hours the next day, and that's a routine, and she's quite right, that keeps me, I think, relatively normal. Doing it by yourself is not much fun.
Good on you, David. Hey, David, I was just, your point there of doing those home jobs during first lockdown out here in Ballarat. I was renovating my house and I now realise that DIY stands for devalue it yourself, Dave, unfortunately.
Well, I'm lucky, Scotty. I've got a neighbour. The bloke across the road is David Jarman, the local builder.
Yep.
And I've rebuilt this house with David's tools and his know-how, and I claim the finished product. That's fantastic. I go, look what I've done here. But in fact, David did it.
Good on you, Dave. And I tell you what, keep those relationships, because you know how valuable they are, especially with those builders, David. Hey, David, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Any advice just for our clubs out there before we leave you?
Well, it's been interesting because I've been watching what's been happening locally here, and we don't have the same restrictions down here on the Bellarine. But I noticed, for instance, the Queenscliff Football Club, which I have a connection with, is almost every night, Monday through Friday, there is a small group with a coach or coaches just working out and spending time with these young people. And I thought that's an incredibly good input and impact for them. So I think, you know, we talk about, you know, this weekend, what about Australia this weekend? We've got 2 AFL preliminary finals. We've got the netball grand final. We've got the Bathurst 500. We've got the Bledisloe Cup in New Zealand, which we're actually doing okay in. We've got the Caulfield Cup and cricket in Tasmania and Western Australia. If sport, and I don't know that that's such a great thing, but if sport is so central to the life that we live, being able to be involved and connected some way is critical. And I think that's both at the professional level and at the local level. And why I've been so keen on SALT's work, because it's all about connecting with people through sport and developing them, you know, professionally and personally in the way that we want them to be developed. So it's a difficult time. I would have thought for more people than it's not, but it's also a time for us to reflect. I certainly have spent a lot more time thinking about who I am and what's important and who should I be connected to and how can I help, rather than the selfish life that I've probably pursued for most of. So, yeah, been a fascinating time for us all.
Yeah, good on you, David. And I probably went a bit early with us being the biggest event this weekend. Your recap there of what's on is there is a bit on when we think about it, David, and hopefully we can all take the time to enjoy it. Really lovely to hear from you, David, and all the best for the remainder of the year.
Thanks very much, Scott.